let's talk about some matchup plays this week in terms of fantasy. We're going to start with the Packers at the Falcons. There's some news just coming out from the Falcons. Cordero Patterson, not on the injury report. I'm not sure if he factors into your starts this week, but take us through who you're starting here, Packers-Falcons.
Patterson has no impact whatsoever.
He'll have more catches than London and Pitts, though, probably, just knowing the Falcons.
Right. He might lead them in targets with 3.
Fair.
And so let's just get a couple of guys out of the way. Drake London, sit him this week.
Okay.
Can't feel good about starting him. Romeo Doubs, 2 of the 3 throws that Jordan Love had inside the 10 went to Romeo Doubs. Those were touchdowns. But we got to talk about these running backs in Green Bay. Aaron Jones didn't practice earlier this week. We don't know what the status is as of Friday. If he practices on Friday, probably going to play in the game. Would be a must-start fantasy running back, a top 10 type guy. If he is out, then A.J. Dillon steps up as someone that could be a top 20 fantasy running back as well. Really hasn't looked as good as Aaron Jones. Very few running backs have. But A.J. Dillon could have potential to score. It's a nice matchup against Atlanta, and I think you could see A.J. Dillon get volume. That's something that helps fantasy managers put up some decent numbers. So he is a low-end 2-number running back, but he needs Jones to not play. If Jones plays, you can't use A.J. Dillon.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Seahawks and Lions up next. Just some good plays here. Jamie, who do you have for starters?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for these teams to hopefully, one, build off what they did last week in Detroit and the other, Seattle, to get right. But I'm still concerned about the Seahawks. Both tackles are going to be out for this game. And so Geno Smith under duress last week from the Rams. I don't think he's a good start this week. Barely inside the top 20 for me. You're still starting DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett's a 3rd receiver. And then we'll just see how good Ken Walker is. A number 2 running back. Great that he dominated the touches, but not necessarily the best of starts because his Detroit run defense going back to last year has been absolutely fantastic. Jared Goff is my starter of the week. Love the setup for him.
Wow.
I think he's going to be an absolute star because he's at home. Now, I don't like that Taylor Decker's probably not going to play, so he's missing an offensive lineman as well. But they have a little bit more depth. They can move Penei Sewell to the left side and just sort of mix and match with the right tackle spot. But Jared Goff last year at home averaged over 26 fantasy points per game. In this matchup in week 4, without Amon-Ra St. Brown, now he did have T.J. Hockenson, so take that into account, 41 fantasy points in that game. So Amon-Ra St. Brown should go off. Josh Reynolds, if he's still on your waiver wire, go pick him up because he's been very good when he's gotten targets, also in this game week 4 last year. And Jahmyr Gibbs, we're going to see the best of Jahmyr Gibbs starting in week 2.
You look like you had something to add.
No, I literally nothing to add.
Okay.
I like Goff too.
We have little signals, and sometimes Dave kind of puts his hand down to make it look like you wanted to say something. So
no.
All right, Josh Allen fans are hoping that he's going to bounce back this week. Raiders-Bills is next, Dave.
Hopefully this signal leads to this signal for James Cook and for Gabe Davis, because these guys, they're flex starters this week. You can't look at either one of them and say, oh yeah, these are must-start fantasy options. Cook had a lot of work, 16 touches. That's really nice. The problem is that they were empty. He didn't play near the goal line, had the 6 targets. That's fine. You just need him to be a little bit more explosive. The Raiders did a good job containing Javonte Williams. They didn't do as good of a job against Samaje Perine, the better pass catcher in Denver. So maybe that gives you some hope for James Cook. I just think he's more of a flex option and not a top 24 type of running back. And I'm kind of tired of making excuses for Gabe Davis because last year it was the injury in week 1, only 4 targets. He also had a tough matchup, but I'm still going to call him a flex this week because the matchup is even better for him than it is for James Cook. I think Stephon Diggs goes off. You'll hear more about that in a little bit. But I think Gabe Davis will have some deep opportunities, and I think he can step up and find the end zone for Buffalo.
I love both those guys.
One more week.
I love both those guys this week. I think it's going to be all systems go for the Bills. I think this is going to be a really bad game for the Raiders.
Okay, well, very interesting. I have Josh Jacobs, so maybe it's not a good week for that.
No, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. I'm talking defensively for the Raiders. They'll be in trouble.
Some fantasy points certainly to be had in the Chiefs Jaguars. Give us your preferred starts here, Jamie. I would assume there's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them, but 2 guys that are coming off disappointing performances, especially given some of the expectations. So Isaiah Pacheco for the Chiefs, you saw last week the best thing that could have happened for him was he ran more routes than Jerick McKinnon, and we think of him as more of just the physical presence, the guy's going to run between the tackles. If he is stealing the passing downs work from McKinnon and does get more involved catching passes from Patrick Mahomes with what that receiving core looked like last week, it's going to be a huge boost for him. So this Jaguars run defense is tough, but I do think that he will be involved again in a shootout, 51.5 the projected total here. So you want to have players associated with this game. I think he's a good number 2 running back for this week, and I do think that'll find the end zone against the Jaguars. Kadarius Toney, just to factor him in a little bit, clearly a bad game last week, but go back to him if you need a receiver, more in 3 receiver leagues, because you heard what Andy Reid said, you heard what Patrick Mahomes said, and the fact that he didn't play that much after being out for a month, but still was tied for the team league in targets, that's going to be a better situation for him. Christian Kirk was awful last week for the Jaguars, despite Zay Jones looking good, Calvin Ridley looking like a star, Travis Etienne, all the guys that we were expecting for Jacksonville to step up. This will be a bounce-back game for Christian Kirk. He will get back to being in the good race. I'm actually going to move him up a couple spots in my ranking, so he'll be inside the top 24. He's not going to have a lot of good performances against zone defense. The Colts play a lot of zone. The Chiefs, not so much. So they were middle of the pack last year in terms of playing zone. This is going to be an opportunity because of the expected points, because of more of a back-and-forth type of shootout. He'll be on the field more. They won't be so much in 12 personnel. You'll see a lot more 3 receivers out there. So Zay Jones is still a decent flyer in a desperation situation, but this will be Christian Kirk bouncing back in terms of being the second receiver behind Calvin Ridley.